So in talking about informed consent and about being above the horizon in terms of potential critics of our work, it seems to me that it becomes increasingly important, it already was important, it's increasingly important that in the early stages of a collaborative representation we explain exactly what it is that we are going to be doing, why we do it that way, how it differs from what might be found in a conventional divorce lawyer's office, who we're going to be working with, what their credentials are, because lawyers are a licensed and highly regulated profession. I certainly wouldn't take the risk of recommending that my clients work with people who don't bring similar kinds of quality control to the table. So I need to make it very clear to my client as they're deciding whether to do this process or not, who it is that we would be involving, what their background and experience and credentials are, and how we're going to be working together specifically, and why we do it that way. Which brings me to the question that also arises frequently on the listserv, which is the question of two coaches, or, I hate this term, but I have to use it to differentiate it, the single coach model. And I want to make really clear that when I say that I hate that term, single coach model, I don't mean that I hate having one mental health professional work on a team with the lawyers and the financial consultants, if any. I think that people can work pretty much any way they want to if they're working at a high standard, if they're well qualified to do what they're doing, and there's a fully informed choice on the part of the clients where they know what they're choosing, what they're getting, what they're not getting. So the problem that I have with this term single coach model is that it blurs those distinctions for no good reason. There isn't any need that I can see to call the work of a single mental health professional coaching when they're working with two people who don't have aligned interests and whose goals may differ. Coaching, in the sense that we use it in collaborative practice, I think is properly reserved for forming an alliance with one person. I don't see how one neutral can form that kind of an alliance with two people whose task is not to come together, but to deconstruct a relationship and head in different directions. And I don't think, in fact, that a single neutral working with a divorcing couple, even if it's exactly the same person who also sometimes works in a two-coach model, when that person is working as a neutral, I don't think structurally they can accomplish the same things as one mental health professional working in a true coaching alliance with one client. And I would defy anybody to demonstrate that one neutral can do exactly the same work with two people headed in opposite directions as you can do with the same background and credentials and training working as an ally to one individual. I don't think it can be justified. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to work as a neutral mental health professional. It means that it's deceptive packaging to call it coaching. I strongly feel that way. And I think that there would be very little disagreement in our community about the work of neutral mental health professionals if there were truth in labeling. A single neutral lawyer working as a mediator cannot do what two lawyers working as collaborative lawyers can do. We know that. It is not different for mental health professionals. Same credential, same person. When you're working as a neutral with people who are inherently adverse, we don't use that word adverse in collaborative practice, but if you look at the direction that they're going, and for those few issues that might be zero-sum issues, how they are inherently positioned toward them initially, they are adverse parties. A neutral doesn't do the same thing as one ally can do. So, I am a voice in the wilderness on this subject of truth in labeling. But I really wish that it would happen, because then everybody would be on board and on the same page. I have never heard anybody say that doing that work is bad. It's not bad, it's good. There are many communities where it's the only feasible way to deliver collaborative mental health services at the negotiating table because there aren't enough people to provide a community from which to choose two coaches, one for each party. So using a neutral is a terrific way to solve that problem. It's not the kind of coaching that we mean when we talk about collaborative divorce coaching as an alliance with an individual to help that person articulate their own concerns and needs clearly at the table, and to help that person deal themselves with potentially destabilizing issues so that they don't come out at the table inappropriately. An individual who's going through a really rough passage is not going to share the kind of information with a neutral that's also speaking with husband, as that person is going to share with her own single ally. Just as the single coach model has been a kind of a lightning rod for absolutely avoidable and pointless disagreement, because it's a labeling issue, it's not a service issue. In the same way, no, not in the same way, in a slightly different way perhaps, I do tend to speak up about the situation in which a single mental health professional claims to be able to do exactly the same work, not only of two coaches, but also a child specialist as well. So that's a single neutral claiming that the services that that neutral delivers to the couple and the family are identical in quality and kind to what three separate professionals working in alliance with husband, wife, children can do. And again, it defies logic, it defies experience. And again, there may be very good reasons for either a couple or a community to decide for the couple to decide to choose services in that mode, and for a community to decide to offer them. Mainly, I think, the rationale that makes sense to me is in rural communities that don't have enough professionals to go around. Because in communities that do have enough professionals to go around, it seems to me that the real issue there is whether you're starting from a client-centered perspective or a professional-centric perspective. If you're starting from a client-centered perspective, then, or the consumer or the end user perspective, I think the way that one would do this to sort it out with kind of intellectual integrity would be to say, what are the needs of the different people who are stakeholders in the collaborative process? What are the needs that every couple and every family with kids predictably are going to have? You know, there are the high-functioning people, and then there are the difficult people, and there's the whole spectrum. But we could make a list of every kind of need that could pop up at the table dealing with a family system. And I think then that from the perspective of designing effective service delivery, if you start with those needs, and then you ask yourself, how could each of these people get the best possible quality of professional services as we try to get from the beginning to the end of that family restructuring? I would suggest to you that the answers that you come up with, if you factor out scarcity of professionals or scarcity of money, and I'm not saying those are unimportant, they are important, but if you factor them out and you simply look at designing the highest quality system that you can to bring professional services in to address predictable human needs during divorce, I do not think you would come up with a single neutral mental health model. I simply don't believe it. And in fact, we've done that exercise at some advanced collaborative trainings. And even people who practice in, dread term, single coach model have, as they put it, had the scales fall off of their eyes. That if you start from the client-centric perspective and the needs perspective, the service delivery model that you would develop would not be that one. It doesn't mean that there's no legitimacy in offering it. But if we don't start from differentiating what's on offer and what you can do and can do well and can do less well with these various configurations, we are not being honest. We are not doing our job of facilitating fully informed choice at the front end.